The 11 answers God gives to those who pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet with faith. You might think you've prayed, and nothing happened. Maybe you've whispered the Divine Mercy Chaplet in desperation, in silence, in darkness, and walked away wondering if the words reached heaven. This video is not just another teaching, it's a revelation. Because God does answer, just not always in the way we expect. Right now, while you're watching this, someone else in the world is on their knees, begging for a miracle. Another is silently weeping through the 3rd decade of the chaplet. Another is lighting a candle, unaware that their prayer will open a door that had been shut for years. And maybe you, yes, you, are about to realize that what you thought was God's silence was actually His most profound response. The Divine Mercy Chaplet is not a formula. It's not a superstition. It's a key, a weapon. A dialogue between the broken heart and the heart that was pierced for our sake. And when you pray it with real faith, even faith the size of a mustard seed, things begin to move in the invisible. You won't always hear thunder. You won't always feel peace. But heaven listens. Heaven responds. And God always answers. This video will take you through 12 answers God gives to those who pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet with faith. Not guesses. Not wishful thinking. But truths confirmed in the lives of saints, mystics, and ordinary people who dared to believe that mercy is stronger than sin, pain, and even death. These answers come in forms you may have overlooked. Moments you thought were coincidences. Delays you mistook for abandonment. Disappointments you misread as punishment. But when seen through the eyes of trust, they reveal the unmistakable fingerprints of divine mercy. We will walk together through these 12 signs, and you will begin to see that heaven has never been quiet. The question is, are we listening? Now, let's begin. When heaven answers with delay, not silence. When you pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet and all you receive in return is silence, it's easy to believe that nothing happened, that God is absent, that your words fell into a void too deep for heaven to hear. But that silence isn't emptiness. That delay isn't divine neglect. It's something far more mysterious and holy than your heart may realize in the moment. Because when God delays, it's not because He's indifferent to your pain, it's because He's doing something sacred inside it. In the stillness after your prayer, something starts to shift. Not always outside of you, but deep within. That silence is not God ignoring you. It is God forming you. It is the silence of the artist before revealing his masterpiece, the silence of the surgeon just before the healing begins. You asked for mercy. You whispered, "For the sake of His sorrowful passion, have mercy on us and on the whole world." And heaven heard you. But God is not a vending machine. He's not transactional. His answers are often buried in time, in process, in the slow unraveling of your own resistance to His will. So many of us think that if the answer doesn't come fast, then the answer isn't coming at all. But some of the most profound works of God come wrapped in the appearance of delay. When Lazarus was dying, Jesus waited 2 more days before going to him. Not because He didn't care, because there was a deeper glory waiting to be revealed. When you pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet, and the healing doesn't come immediately, or the relationship doesn't restore overnight, or the doors don't open right away, that doesn't mean you were ignored. It means heaven is operating on a schedule you cannot see. And sometimes the very thing you call a delay is the exact moment God is planting the answer beneath the surface. The chaplet is not a quick-fix formula. It is a surrender. It's a prayer that says, "I trust in you," not, "I trust in a specific outcome." And that trust must be purified, because God wants you to love Him not for what He gives, but for who He is. Sometimes the delay is a purifying fire. It strips away the illusion that God is only good if He answers fast. It reveals whether you really believe in His mercy or just hope for a transaction. In that waiting, God is not only preparing the answer, He is preparing you to receive it. There are things in your heart that might reject the blessing if it came too soon. Pride, fear, dependence on others instead of Him. And so, in mercy, He waits, not to withhold, but to protect, to strengthen, to purify, to make sure that when the answer arrives, it doesn't destroy you, it transforms you. And there's something else. While you wait, others are being touched. The timing of God's answer in your life is never just about you. It is intricately connected to others around you. Perhaps God is delaying your answer because it will intersect with someone else's breakthrough in a way that you never imagined. You don't see it now, but later, looking back, you will. The conversation that happened at just the right moment. The person who showed up when you least expected. The opportunity that appeared after a season of silence. None of it is coincidence. It is choreography. Mercy choreographed in heaven, unfolding in divine precision. And what happens to your soul in the meantime? In that long waiting? It begins to ache. And in that ache, it begins to long. And in that longing, it begins to pray differently, deeper, more sincerely, not for results, but for union, for God Himself. And that may be the most beautiful answer of all, that your heart becomes willing to love Him even if He says, not yet. If you're in that space right now, praying the Divine Mercy Chaplet and seeing no change, no miracle, no movement, don't quit. You may be closer to the answer than you think. What feels like delay may be the final layer of resistance being peeled away from your soul. What feels like silence may be the sound of God drawing breath before speaking into your life in a way that changes everything. The saints knew this. Saint Faustina often waited in darkness. There were moments she felt completely abandoned by God. Yet she kept praying. She kept trusting. Because she knew that silence was not absence. That delay was not punishment. That God's mercy doesn't always arrive on our schedule, but it never arrives late. So keep praying. Keep waiting. Keep trusting. Because when heaven delays, it is never empty. It is never cruel. It is never forgetful. It is a sacred pause. A space being made for something greater than you asked. And that is mercy. The hidden grace behind sudden disappointments. You prayed with sincerity. You trusted. You hoped. And then, the very thing you longed for fell apart. The job didn't work out. The relationship ended. The door you knocked on for months remained shut. And it hurts. Because you didn't walk into that situation alone. You walked in holding the Divine Mercy Chaplet in your hands. You brought your faith with you. You believed that if you placed your heart in God's mercy, He would respond with a yes. But what came instead was a no. And it felt like rejection, like betrayal, like divine silence turned into divine disappointment. But here's what very few people understand. Many of God's greatest mercies come disguised as losses. Because what feels like a denial may actually be a divine redirection. And what looks like a ruined plan might be your soul being rerouted away from something that would have wounded you deeper than you know. When you pray the chaplet with faith, you are not asking God to do your will. You are asking Him to pour His mercy into your situation. And mercy doesn't always look like comfort. Sometimes it looks like disruption. It looks like broken expectations. It looks like pain that you didn't ask for and interruptions you didn't welcome. But the truth is, God sees what you cannot. And because His mercy is not sentimental, it's perfect. He intervenes in ways that are often misunderstood by the human heart. Imagine you're walking toward a cliff, convinced it's a path to blessing, and you pray. You beg for that path to open. But instead, it collapses. You're devastated. What you don't realize is that God, in His mercy, removed the ground before you could fall from it. That's not cruelty. That's grace. That's the kind of fierce, unrelenting mercy that loves you enough to say no when yes would destroy you. And yet, we rarely see it in the moment. The human heart mourns the door that shut. It aches for what could have been. And in that ache, the enemy whispers, "God has abandoned you." But that's a lie. Disappointment is not divine neglect. It's often divine protection. The Chaplet of Divine Mercy is a prayer that invites God to move freely in your life, even if it means disrupting your plans. Every time you say, "Have mercy on us," you are inviting heaven to intervene in ways that may not match your expectations, but always match your need. Sometimes, the most merciful answer God gives is the one you didn't want to hear. There are graces that only appear after collapse. There is a certain clarity that only comes when your plans fall apart, and you're forced to ask deeper questions. Who am I without that dream? What do I really believe about God's goodness? Do I love Him only when things go my way? These aren't easy questions, but they're holy questions, and it's in that holy ache that your soul begins to grow. If you've experienced a deep disappointment after praying the chaplet, don't assume it was a failed prayer. Look again. Look deeper. What changed after that prayer? What was removed? What did you avoid? What habit was broken? What toxic pattern ended? What illusion was shattered? Sometimes God doesn't give you what you asked for because He's trying to give you something eternal instead, like maturity, surrender, detachment, humility, or a deeper capacity for love. Saint Faustina herself experienced this. She was rejected by multiple convents before finding her true spiritual home. She was misunderstood, dismissed, even silenced at times. But through every setback, God was leading her closer to the very mission she was born for. She didn't see it immediately, but she trusted that disappointment was not the end of the story. It was a chapter in the mercy she couldn't yet understand. And what about you? What if your greatest spiritual breakthrough is on the other side of that closed door? What if what you call loss is actually the Lord making space for something far greater? The person who walked away might have taken your peace in the short term, but their absence created room for healing you didn't know you needed. The job that didn't come through might have spared you from spiritual compromise. The opportunity that passed you by may have saved your soul from pride or spiritual fatigue. God is not indifferent to your tears. He collects them. He sees every moment of disappointment, but He also sees what you don't. The chain reaction of grace that begins when you trust Him through the no. The chaplet is not a spell to control outcomes. It is a surrender into mercy, a prayer that says, "Jesus, I trust in you, even when I don't understand you." That kind of faith shakes heaven. And it unlocks a kind of answer that doesn't just fix your circumstances, it transforms your soul. So if you're standing in the ruins of something you thought God would bless, take heart. You're not being punished. You're being protected. You're not forgotten. You're being rerouted. And what seems like a loss right now might one day be the moment you point back to and say, "That was the mercy I didn't recognize, but it saved me." The unseen battle that begins when you pray. When you pick up the Divine Mercy Chaplet, you may think you are simply praying for yourself, for a need, for a miracle. You imagine your words drifting quietly to heaven, like a letter sent by a faithful hand. What most people do not realize is that each prayer of the chaplet is not a quiet request. It is a spiritual act of warfare. It is a battle that begins the moment you invoke mercy. You do not see it. You do not hear it. But it is happening in realms beyond human sight, where angels and demons, grace and temptation, confrontation and protection collide. The chaplet is a declaration that you trust in the power of God over the power of the world. Every bead you pray, every "for the sake of his sorrowful passion, have mercy on us and on the whole world," is like a blow struck against the darkness. It is an act of resistance against fear, despair, and spiritual forces that would keep your soul confined. You might finish the chaplet and walk away feeling unchanged, yet the battle has already begun. Your prayer is not measured by feelings. It is measured by obedience, faith, and persistence. In the moments immediately following prayer, your life may feel ordinary, uneventful, even quiet. Yet at the same time, the invisible forces of heaven and hell are responding. Sometimes protection arrives before you recognize the danger. Sometimes temptations are broken before they manifest. Sometimes a chain is loosed in your life that had held you for years. This is the hidden reality of the chaplet. What you cannot see is just as real as what you can. The enemy often reacts to the presence of prayer. When you pray the chaplet with sincere faith, spiritual resistance begins. Confusion, anxiety, and distraction may rise unexpectedly. These are not coincidences. They are signs that the unseen battle is real. Your prayer has entered into a struggle, and the enemy seeks to silence your faith or distract your heart. But this is precisely when your prayer has the most power. When you remain focused, when your heart perseveres despite doubt or emotional turbulence, the battle is won in ways you will only recognize in retrospect. Saint Faustina's life is a testament to this hidden struggle. She faced spiritual attacks, mockery, misunderstanding, and inner turmoil precisely because of her prayers and visions. Yet she remained steadfast, knowing that every bead she moved with her fingers was a movement of mercy that disrupted evil, even if she couldn't see the immediate effect. And this is what happens in your life when you pray the chaplet. Your small, faithful act triggers a ripple across dimensions, unseen, unheard, but profoundly real. Do not undervalue the power of consistent prayer. The chaplet does not only ask for mercy, it commands spiritual forces to step aside. It invites angels to intervene. It places you under divine protection, and it challenges the enemy to retreat. Your faith in saying these prayers matters more than any outward sign of change. Every repetition, every whisper of "Jesus, I trust in you," is a spiritual strike. Every time you rise from prayer with trust still intact, you have won a victory that the world will never measure. And yet, God's timing is perfect. The results of this battle often appear subtly. A situation that once seemed impossible begins to shift. A relationship that was strained eases. Fear that dominated your thoughts dissipates. Opportunities arise at just the right moment. You may never fully trace these outcomes to the exact moment you prayed, but rest assured that the invisible battle is at work. Your prayers are weapons, and mercy is your shield. This is the profound secret of the chaplet. It engages you directly in spiritual reality without requiring you to understand it fully. Your role is faith, persistence, and surrender. The battles are unseen, but the victories manifest. The moment you begin this prayer with the intention of trust, the battle begins. The enemy reacts, heaven responds, and your soul moves toward freedom, protection, and grace, even if your eyes cannot yet see it. So when you pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet, know that you are not alone. You are on the front lines of a spiritual reality, armed with the beads of mercy, the words of faith, and the power of God. This is the unseen battle that begins the moment you pray. And if you stay faithful, you will discover that the impact of your prayer is far greater than what you can measure with human eyes. Heaven is at work, and every prayer matters. The alignment of your heart to God's will. When you pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet with true faith, one of the most profound answers you can receive is internal. It is not a visible miracle, not a change in circumstances, not an immediate sign from the outside world. It is the quiet, transformative work God does inside your heart. It is the alignment of your desires, thoughts, and emotions to His will. Many people pray seeking answers that fit their own plans, their own timelines, their own expectations. And while God hears every word, His response often comes in reshaping you to desire what He desires, to see what He sees, and to trust beyond what you can control. This alignment is subtle at first. You may notice a gentle disquiet when your old attachments or selfish desires arise. The things you once fought to hold on to suddenly lose their grip. What once seemed urgent, essential, or critical no longer dominates your mind. This is not weakness. It is mercy. God is reordering your heart, preparing you to receive blessings in ways that your previous self could not handle. It may feel like restraint, like loss, like patience being tested, but it is a divine recalibration, a necessary purification of your inner life. As you pray the chaplet consistently, you begin to notice that your judgments become tempered, your anger softens, your impulses lose their urgency, your fear diminishes. This is not because you are stronger, smarter, or more disciplined. It is because the Spirit is aligning you to His plan. Your heart starts to beat in rhythm with God's will. Your desires for comfort, control, or recognition begin to give way to desires for obedience, humility, and trust. In this realignment, you may experience moments of discomfort, confusion, or even resistance. That is the sign that transformation is occurring. God is gently removing the walls that prevent full surrender. This internal response often surpasses any external blessing. While miracles and answered prayers are visible and celebrated, the alignment of your heart produces lasting, deep change. You become more patient in the face of trial, more compassionate toward others, more serene in uncertainty. Your soul begins to resonate with a peace that no circumstance can disrupt, because it is rooted not in outcomes, but in trust. You learn to say, even in hardship, "Thy will be done," and mean it from the depths of your being. This work of alignment also prepares you for the spiritual battles that follow. When the chaplet stirs unseen forces, when divine protection is at work, when mercy is intervening in ways you cannot yet perceive, your heart must be ready to cooperate with God's grace. If your desires remain self-centered, your eyes remain fixed on your own expectations, then even the blessings that come can be missed, misunderstood, or rejected. The chaplet invites you to surrender, and this alignment is the proof that your surrender is taking root. Saint Faustina wrote about this many times. She experienced moments when her own will was in conflict with God's commands. The chaplet, recited faithfully, cultivated a heart that desired mercy, forgiveness, and holiness above comfort or personal ambition. This is the same answer God offers you. It is a shift from a life oriented around your own plans to a life attuned to His divine rhythm. You may not see it in dramatic ways, but the alignment is visible in the calmness of your soul, the clarity of your judgment, and the freedom to accept whatever comes as part of God's providence. Even if you are struggling, even if your prayers feel unanswered, even if life feels chaotic, this internal realignment is silently occurring. You are being trained in the school of divine timing. Your wants, your fears, your attachments, they are all being gently redirected toward the one who knows the beginning and the end. This is the hidden mercy in prayer. It is the answer that does not shout but whispers, that does not shock but steadies, that does not satisfy temporarily but fulfills eternally. So when you pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet, be attentive to this subtle work. Notice how your heart changes, how your perspective shifts, how your soul begins to long not for what you want, but for what God desires. This alignment is one of the most profound responses of God to faithful prayer. It is His way of preparing you for the life He has destined for you, the grace He has planned for you, and the mercy that will sustain you through every trial. The more you surrender, the more you cooperate, the more fully your heart aligns with Him, and the deeper the answer becomes. This is a prayer that transforms the inner life, a response that surpasses the visible world, and a gift of mercy that lasts for eternity. Divine redirection through unexpected encounters. When you pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet with faith, one of the most remarkable answers God gives is through people. Not always in ways you expect, and not always immediately visible, but in subtle and sometimes startling encounters that redirect your life toward His mercy and plan. You might walk down the street, sit in a cafe, or attend a meeting, and suddenly someone appears in your life in a way that seems coincidental. That coincidence is rarely random. It is a divine appointment, an answer to your prayer, a manifestation of God's unseen hand moving to guide you, protect you, or open a door you never even thought existed. These encounters can come as strangers who offer wisdom at the exact moment you need it, or as people from your past who return unexpectedly with a message, a warning, or a blessing. Sometimes they are mentors, friends, or companions you have yet to recognize as instruments of God's mercy. The chaplet creates a spiritual resonance that attracts these moments, aligning your steps with the path that heaven wants you to follow. Even a passing conversation can carry the weight of divine intervention when seen through the lens of faith. The answer delivered through people is rarely dramatic at first glance. Often it is subtle, almost imperceptible. A word of advice, a gesture of kindness, a shared insight that plants a seed in your mind, or a question that stirs your heart. These are the channels through which God responds. While you may have asked for clarity, provision, healing, or direction, the response might arrive cloaked in human form. Your challenge is to recognize the spiritual significance and receive it with gratitude. This requires discernment and attentiveness. Too often, we pass by these encounters as ordinary moments, unaware that they carry divine weight. The chaplet acts as a spiritual magnet, opening channels for these interventions. When you pray, for the sake of His sorrowful passion, have mercy on us and on the whole world, you are inviting God to orchestrate circumstances that cannot be forced or predicted. You are surrendering not only your needs, but your path itself to His guidance. The people who cross your way after such prayers are often instruments to move you in directions you could not have imagined. It might be a reconnection that heals old wounds, a conversation that redirects your career, or a silent presence that shifts your perspective at the exact moment you need it. There is a wisdom in these divine appointments that surpasses understanding. Sometimes you do not see the full purpose until months or even years later. A brief encounter may seem trivial, but could initiate a cascade of events that changes your trajectory forever. Your prayer activated divine timing and coordination, and the people involved are channels of that answer. The world may interpret it as coincidence, but in faith, you see it as the fingerprints of God. Saint Faustina experienced this repeatedly. Individuals entered her life at crucial moments, delivering encouragement, direction, or correction that she could not have received on her own. These interventions were not mechanical or predictable. They were expressions of God's mercy, perfectly timed and placed. The chaplet was both the instrument and the invocation, the prayer and the key that unlocked these encounters. It was the bridge between human action and divine orchestration. You may also notice that sometimes these encounters challenge you. They push you out of comfort, confront old patterns, or demand courage and obedience. That is part of the answer too. Divine redirection is rarely gentle in the sense of convenience. It is precise in shaping you for what God intends. The people you meet are instruments not just to serve you, but to refine your faith, test your trust, and reveal areas where surrender is required. So, after you pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet, pay attention to the people you meet, the conversations you have, and the guidance you receive. Recognize that God's answers may not arrive as a letter, a vision, or an immediate miracle, but as living encounters that direct your steps, align your heart, and open paths you could never have imagined. This is one of the most profound, subtle, and life-changing ways that God responds when you pray with faith. These encounters are not accidents. They are the orchestration of mercy, the unseen movement of heaven responding to a heart fully surrendered. A sudden clarity in the midst of confusion. When life feels chaotic, when decisions seem impossible, and your mind is clouded by doubt and anxiety, the Divine Mercy Chaplet can bring answers that are quiet yet profound. One of the most powerful ways God responds to faithful prayer is by giving sudden clarity. It doesn't always arrive with fanfare. There is no dramatic light or booming voice. Instead, it comes as a deep, almost imperceptible shift inside you. A clarity that cuts through the fog of confusion and points your soul toward the path He wants you to follow. This clarity often emerges at unexpected moments. You may be walking alone, sitting in silence, or even asleep, and suddenly a solution, an insight, or a perspective opens in your mind. It may feel like a thought you already had, yet it carries a weight and certainty that could only come from God. This is the answer. It is the Spirit moving in your heart to guide, direct, and illuminate. The chaplet, prayed with trust, creates a resonance with divine wisdom that positions your mind to receive these moments of insight. The human heart tends to panic when circumstances are unclear. Decisions are postponed. Anxiety multiplies. But prayer, especially the chaplet, works quietly to reorder your priorities and sharpen your perception. It aligns your attention to what is essential and filters distractions, helping you see not just the surface of a situation, but its deeper truth. In a way, the chaplet acts like a spiritual compass, pointing toward God's will even when the terrain seems uncertain and treacherous. Clarity through prayer is not always immediate. Sometimes the insight comes after a series of events, after a period of struggle, or following moments of apparent silence. You may look back and realize that answers were already present, but your heart was not yet ready to perceive them. The chaplet prepares you to recognize what God has already orchestrated and helps your understanding catch up to divine timing. This patience in recognition is part of the mercy itself. It ensures that the clarity you receive is received with trust, and not taken for granted. Saint Faustina wrote about moments when prayer seemed to change nothing outwardly, yet internally, her understanding of God's mercy deepened in ways that guided every decision she made. She experienced sudden insights about how to act, what to say, and where to direct her energy, all because of faithful prayer. These internal illuminations are one of the most overlooked responses God gives, yet they can alter the trajectory of your life more profoundly than any visible miracle. The clarity also brings peace. Confusion often breeds fear. Fear clouds judgment and prevents decisive action. When God grants clarity, it not only points the way, it reassures the heart. You may still face challenges, but suddenly they are manageable because you can see the path and trust the direction. Even when obstacles remain, your confidence in navigating them grows because God's wisdom has entered your consciousness. Sometimes the answer comes in small, incremental pieces. A thought, a feeling, a quiet nudge toward a choice you had not considered. The chaplet opens the channels for these subtle communications, training your mind to discern divine guidance. You learn to trust not only the outcomes, but the process, the gradual unfolding of God's plan, and the invisible alignment of events that you cannot yet fully understand. What is crucial to remember is that this clarity is both a gift and a responsibility. Once you perceive God's guidance, you are called to act in faith. The insight itself is part of the answer, but the answer reaches its fullness only when you move according to what God has revealed. That is the interplay between prayer and obedience, insight and action, mercy and cooperation. So, when you find yourself lost, uncertain, or overwhelmed, pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet. Persist in faith. Wait attentively. Because even when nothing appears to change outwardly, God may be preparing a sudden insight that will illuminate your path, settle your heart, and guide your steps in ways that only His perfect wisdom can orchestrate. This clarity is not random. It is a direct answer from heaven, tailored to your life, your moment, and your trust. Emotional release as a spiritual breakthrough. When you pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet with genuine faith, one of the most transformative responses God gives is emotional release. It may happen as tears that you didn't realize were waiting to fall, as a sudden wave of grief, or as the lifting of burdens that have weighed on your soul for years. Many people approach the chaplet expecting miracles in the external world, but one of the most profound answers occurs within, the cleansing, liberating movement of the heart. This emotional release is not a weakness, it is mercy manifesting, a spiritual breakthrough in its most intimate form. Often we carry pain that logic cannot resolve. We have regrets, disappointments, and wounds hidden even from ourselves. When the chaplet is prayed with sincere trust, it creates space for these emotions to surface and be met by God's mercy. The sorrow you feel may seem overwhelming, but it is precisely the instrument through which grace flows. Tears are not random. They are a signal that your heart is opening to receive healing, that God is gently dismantling the defenses you've built around your soul. This release may feel sudden or gradual. Sometimes it arrives while praying, as a quiet surrender of anger or fear. Other times, it comes afterward, unexpectedly during the day, in a conversation, or in a moment of solitude. God knows the perfect timing for these moments, and He allows them to occur in a way that your soul can endure and integrate. What feels like emotional vulnerability is actually divine strength, a channel through which mercy reshapes your heart and strengthens your faith. The power of this answer lies in its intimacy. Unlike visible miracles, emotional release affects the deepest parts of your being. It removes spiritual blockages that have held you back from trusting, from loving fully, and from receiving God's grace completely. Every tear shed in faith is collected by heaven. Every moment of heartfelt confession, spoken or unspoken, is acknowledged. In this process, the chaplet becomes more than a prayer. It becomes a conduit of purification, a lifeline that reconnects you with the source of divine mercy. Saint Faustina herself experienced this form of divine response. Her writings recount moments when intense emotional turmoil coincided with prayer, only to leave her with a profound sense of peace, release, and clarity afterward. She recognized these experiences as direct interventions of God's mercy, a way in which the chaplet prepared her soul for greater spiritual work. This is a pattern that repeats in the lives of those who pray faithfully. Emotional release precedes transformation. It is the first sign that God is at work internally, even when external circumstances remain unchanged. It is also important to understand that emotional release is not always comfortable. It may bring hidden sorrows to the surface. It may reveal unresolved grief, fears, or long-standing anger. But this is precisely why it is a sign of answered prayer. God is not merely giving comfort. He is doing the work of restoration, dismantling what impedes you from fully experiencing His mercy. It is a form of spiritual surgery, delicate yet profound, that brings you closer to the heart of God. When you notice this response, embrace it with faith. Don't shy away from the tears, the grief, or the release. Recognize them as signs that God is responding to your chaplet, that your prayer has not gone unheard, and that He is moving in ways beyond your comprehension. Emotional release is both the answer and the preparation for the deeper miracles to follow. It clears the path for discernment, alignment, and ultimately the manifestation of God's will in your life. So if you feel an unexpected wave of emotion while or after praying the Divine Mercy Chaplet, understand it as a breakthrough, not a burden. Trust in it as a divine answer, a sign that your heart is being made ready for transformation. This is God's mercy working in silence, unseen by others, but powerfully effective in renewing, healing, and preparing your soul for the next stage of His plan. Your prayer has been heard, and your heart is responding. The unexpected collapse of pride. When you pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet with faith, one of the most profound ways God answers is by humbling the heart. Pride is subtle. It disguises itself as confidence, self-reliance, or the illusion of control. It builds walls in the soul that block mercy, peace, and true obedience. The chaplet, when prayed with sincerity, becomes a force that gently but decisively breaks down those walls. This is not punishment, but a necessary divine intervention. Without humility, the soul cannot fully receive God's mercy. And so, the collapse of pride is one of the most transformative answers you can experience. This process often begins quietly. You may notice discomfort when your expectations are unmet or your plans fail. You may feel exposed when your talents or achievements are overlooked. You may be confronted by circumstances that make you realize how little control you truly have. These are not coincidences. They are responses to your prayer, orchestrated by God to loosen the grip of ego and self-reliance. It is the unseen work of God reshaping your interior life, aligning it with His will. Pride can be deeply rooted, even in those who consider themselves humble. The chaplet touches the hidden corners of the soul where arrogance, self-centeredness, and judgment reside. As you pray, mercy begins to flow into these areas, revealing weaknesses, dependencies, and attachments that are contrary to God's plan. Sometimes this reveals itself as embarrassment, correction from others, or moments where you feel vulnerable. What seems like adversity is actually a divine answer, a tool of mercy designed to free you from spiritual bondage. The collapse of pride is also intimately linked to growth in empathy and compassion. As walls fall, you begin to see others differently. Their struggles, failures, and weaknesses become more apparent, not to judge, but to love. God uses this internal restructuring to open your heart to the needs of others, to cultivate humility that is active, not passive. Your prayers are not just for yourself. They shape the way you engage with the world. Through the chaplet, mercy extends through your humility, becoming a living reality in your actions and thoughts. Saint Faustina wrote about these moments of divine intervention. She experienced correction, misunderstanding, and even mockery, yet she recognized that God was teaching her humility. Her recognition of personal insufficiency allowed her to fully trust in God's mercy. Similarly, when you pray the chaplet, the collapse of pride is not a sign of failure. It is a sign that your heart is ready for deeper communion with God. It is the divine way of removing obstacles that prevent the soul from growing in grace. This process is rarely immediate or painless. It takes persistence, awareness, and faith. But the beauty of this answer lies in its permanence. When pride is broken through the work of mercy, the heart is permanently softened. The soul becomes more receptive, more obedient, and more aligned with divine will. This transformation allows you to see your life, your challenges, and your relationships through the lens of God's mercy rather than through self-interest or fear. So, when you feel humbled, confronted, or vulnerable after praying the Divine Mercy Chaplet, recognize it as an answer from God. It is a sacred dismantling of pride, a preparation of the heart, and a powerful demonstration of mercy in action. Your faith is being tested and strengthened, your soul is being purified, and the space that pride once occupied is being replaced with trust, obedience, and divine love. The chaplet is not just a prayer, it is a tool of spiritual formation that dismantles barriers and opens the soul to the fullness of God's mercy. Protection from an unseen danger. When you pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet with faith, one of the most profound ways God answers is by protecting you from dangers you cannot see. These interventions are often invisible, unnoticed, and yet they are real. They may never appear in your life as obvious miracles or dramatic rescues, but they are the work of divine mercy shielding you from harm. The chaplet is not only a prayer for mercy, it is a spiritual shield, invoking God's protection over your body, mind, and soul. When you pray it sincerely, you are placing yourself under divine care in ways that surpass human understanding. The dangers God protects you from can be physical, emotional, or spiritual. Perhaps an accident was averted, though you never knew it. Perhaps a decision you were about to make would have led to harm, but circumstances prevented it in ways that seemed coincidental. Perhaps a temptation, a misleading opportunity, or a destructive influence was quietly removed from your path. The chaplet initiates these protections because it aligns your life with divine mercy, creating a shield around you that the human eye cannot detect. The protection is real, and the answer is tangible, even if you are unaware of it at the time. This protection is part of the unseen battle that begins with faithful prayer. When you invoke God's mercy, you are engaging in spiritual warfare. Your prayers attract the presence of angels and repel evil forces. The chaplet is like armor, a series of prayers that surround your life with a protective force. While you may not perceive the details, the effects manifest in ways that maintain your safety, preserve your peace, and prevent harm from entering your life. God's intervention is often hidden to ensure that His will unfolds perfectly, without drawing attention to the mechanisms of His protection. Many people do not recognize these interventions because they are subtle. You might walk away from a situation that seemed ordinary, only later realizing that avoiding it prevented a catastrophe. You might meet someone who could have led you astray, but was absent for reasons you cannot explain. These are the ways God answers your prayers, through protection. The chaplet creates a spiritual environment where divine oversight actively safeguards your life and directs circumstances according to mercy and wisdom. Saint Faustina herself experienced this type of divine protection. She often encountered hostility, misunderstandings, and dangers while living out her mission, yet God preserved her. Her prayers and devotion to the chaplet aligned her life with divine protection, shielding her from harm she could neither anticipate nor avoid on her own. This principle applies to anyone who prays with faith. God's hand is present, guiding, shielding, and intervening invisibly to ensure that mercy is effective and your soul is preserved. It is important to understand that this protection does not eliminate all challenges or hardships. Life will still present trials, difficulties, and growth opportunities. However, the dangers that could derail your spiritual journey or destroy your life in ways contrary to God's will are removed or mitigated. The chaplet ensures that you remain on the path that mercy intends, even when obstacles arise. This is a profound answer from God. Safety, guidance, and divine oversight that often goes unnoticed, yet its effects are undeniable in the long term. When you pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet, trust that God is guarding your steps. Trust that the invisible is at work. Every repetition of the prayer, every bead counted with faith, creates layers of protection. You may never fully perceive the details of this divine intervention, but you will recognize its effects in the stability of your life, the avoidance of misfortune, and the peace that accompanies your faithful heart. This unseen protection is one of the most tangible yet silent answers God gives to those who trust in His mercy. The rise of a faith you didn't know you had. When you pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet with genuine faith, one of the most powerful answers God gives is the awakening of faith itself. This is not a superficial confidence or fleeting hope. It is a deep, abiding trust that begins to take root in your soul, even in ways you had not recognized before. Many who pray the chaplet discover that their belief in God's mercy strengthens in moments when they previously felt distant, weak, or spiritually cold. The chaplet has a unique way of nurturing a faith that surpasses understanding and persists through trials. This rise of faith often begins subtly. You might notice a shift in how you perceive challenges, setbacks, or disappointments. Where you once doubted or feared, a quiet trust begins to emerge. Your prayers, once mechanical or hesitant, become heartfelt petitions. Your heart starts to rely less on what you can control and more on what God is orchestrating. This faith does not arrive fully formed. It grows, nurtured by each repetition of the chaplet, each act of surrender, and each moment of trust. With consistent prayer, the heart becomes fertile ground for a belief that cannot easily be shaken. The Divine Mercy Chaplet is more than a devotional act. It is a catalyst for spiritual transformation. As you pray, God answers not only by granting mercy for your petitions, but also by cultivating a resilient faith within you. This faith manifests in subtle ways: patience in adversity, courage in uncertainty, serenity amid chaos. Even when external circumstances remain difficult, the presence of faith changes how you experience life. You are no longer entirely dependent on outcomes. Your soul learns to rest in God's providence. This awakening of faith is both personal and practical. It transforms how you interact with others, how you respond to trials, and how you navigate decisions. When faith rises, fear diminishes. Anxiety loses its power. You begin to act with confidence, not in your own strength, but in God's guidance. The chaplet works as a spiritual exercise that conditions the heart to trust in God's mercy, even when circumstances seem hopeless. This is the invisible yet profound way God answers those who pray faithfully. Saint Faustina's life exemplifies this answer. She began with a humble, ordinary faith, yet through her devotion to the chaplet, her belief deepened, expanded, and became resilient against ridicule, opposition, and spiritual attack. Her faith was not built on comfort or assurance of visible miracles. It was cultivated through persistent trust, surrender, and prayer. This same pattern is available to every believer who prays the chaplet with intention and devotion. The prayer awakens a faith that can sustain the soul through challenges and trials that might otherwise overwhelm you. This rising faith is also a preparatory gift. It equips the soul to receive further answers, guidance, and blessings. Without it, miracles may be overlooked, opportunities ignored, and divine interventions misinterpreted. The chaplet strengthens the inner disposition of the believer so that when God acts, the soul is ready to recognize, accept, and cooperate with His will. Faith becomes both the answer and the key to understanding the answers that follow. So, if you feel spiritually stagnant, doubtful, or distant, continue praying the Divine Mercy Chaplet. Persist in devotion, trust in the repetition of mercy, and allow your heart to be softened by God's grace. Over time, faith will rise within you, stronger and deeper than you ever imagined possible. This is one of the most profound answers God gives, not just granting what you ask for, but transforming you so that you can fully embrace His mercy, His will, and His plan for your life. A call to intercede for others. When you pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet with sincere faith, one of the most surprising and transformative answers from God is a call to intercede for others. Often, we pray focused solely on our own needs, healing, guidance, provision, or relief. Yet the chaplet, when prayed with true trust in God's mercy, begins to expand your heart beyond yourself. You start to feel drawn to the struggles of others, the pain and burdens that surround you, and a deep compassion stirs within you. This is not incidental. It is God's answer, calling you to become a vessel of His mercy in the lives of those around you. This call to intercession can appear in many forms. Sometimes it comes as empathy you cannot explain, a sudden awareness of someone's suffering, or an urge to pray for a friend, family member, or even a stranger. Other times, it manifests as the opportunity to act, speaking encouragement, providing support, or sharing spiritual guidance. These moments are not coincidental. They are the natural fruit of a heart aligned with God's mercy. The chaplet opens your spiritual perception so that you begin to sense the needs of others and respond as instruments of God's grace. The process is subtle, yet profound. As your own petitions are answered, or as you experience the grace of emotional or spiritual breakthrough, God begins to redirect your focus outward. Your prayers start to include not just personal requests, but also intercessions for the world, for the sick, the lost, the fearful, and those trapped in despair. This is an extension of divine mercy. You are participating in God's plan to pour compassion, healing, and grace into lives beyond your own. The more you pray the chaplet, the more attuned you become to these opportunities for intercession. Intercession is also a spiritual discipline. It teaches humility and selflessness. While you once may have prayed with an expectation of immediate personal gain or relief, intercessory prayer shifts your perspective. you realize that your petitions are part of a larger tapestry of mercy. By praying for others, you connect with God's work in the world, and your heart expands to accommodate the weight of compassion, empathy, and love. In this way, your prayer becomes transformative not only for you but for countless others, seen and unseen. Saint Faustina's life is filled with this pattern. She experienced the call to pray for souls in need, often strangers, and through her intercession, many found conversion, relief, or spiritual awakening. Her personal petitions were always intertwined with the needs of others. This is the model God offers to those who faithfully pray the chaplet. Your own heart and life become conduits for His mercy in action. You begin to realize that answers to prayer are not just about receiving blessings. They are about participating in the expansion of God's kingdom of mercy. The call to intercede also transforms your understanding of your own struggles. As you pray for others, you begin to perceive your challenges in the context of a larger reality. Your burdens, while real, are now shared in the presence of God's mercy. Compassion cultivates resilience and opens your heart to grace that might otherwise remain dormant. Your prayer becomes both a gift and a channel for the divine response, illustrating that true faith is never isolated. It is communal, relational, and expansive. So when you feel drawn to pray for someone else, especially after experiencing the chaplet, recognize it as an answer to your prayers. It is a divine invitation to participate in mercy, to extend grace beyond yourself, and to become an instrument through which God moves in the world. This call is one of the most profound answers God gives. It transforms not only your life, but the lives of countless others, creating a ripple of mercy that reaches far beyond what you can see or imagine. Through your intercession, prayer becomes living, active, and deeply connected to the heartbeat of heaven. The divine signature you only recognize in retrospect. One of the most profound answers God gives to those who pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet with faith is revealed only with time. Often, we fail to see the full impact of prayer in the moment. The results, the guidance, and the mercy unfold slowly, sometimes years later, when the pieces of life align and the fingerprints of God become visible. This is the divine signature, the unmistakable mark of heaven on your life. It is subtle, patient, and transformative. The chaplet prepares you to notice these signatures, to recognize mercy where once you saw coincidence, delay, or even suffering. At first, the answers to your prayers may feel incomplete or mysterious. Doors close. Opportunities are delayed. Pain persists. The human heart often interprets these experiences as neglect or oversight. Yet in hindsight, you begin to recognize patterns and connections that were invisible at the time. Events, relationships, and insights you once misunderstood suddenly make sense. The delay, the emotional release, the disappointments, the encounters, they were all part of God's orchestration, carefully weaving mercy into your life in ways only He could see. The chaplet draws your heart into alignment with this divine rhythm, teaching patience, trust, and discernment. This signature of God is often revealed through reflection. As you look back, you notice that prayers you thought unanswered were quietly answered in ways that shaped your destiny, redirected your life, or preserved you from harm. The moments of doubt, fear, and struggle were not wasted. They were formative, preparing you for the blessings and understanding you would receive later. Faithful prayer becomes a lens through which you perceive these connections, revealing that God's mercy is not only present, but actively shaping your journey. The invisible work of prayer is often the most powerful and lasting. The divine signature also communicates purpose. In retrospect, You can see that nothing in your life happens by chance when aligned with God's will. The people who appeared, the challenges you endured, the paths that closed, they were all intentional, part of a larger design. The chaplet positions your heart to perceive this design, to trust that what seemed chaotic or meaningless was actually guided by love. Recognizing this pattern strengthens faith, encourages hope, and fosters deep gratitude. It is an answer that confirms that every prayer mattered, even when the immediate outcome seemed unclear. Saint Faustina's life demonstrates this principle vividly. Her experiences, filled with suffering, doubt, and moments of seeming neglect, ultimately revealed the vast scope of God's mercy in ways that could only be understood after the events had passed. Her devotion to the chaplet allowed her to trust in the unseen, to persist in prayer, and to recognize the divine patterns that unfolded over time. This teaches us that patience, perseverance, and attentiveness to God's subtle work are essential in perceiving the full impact of His mercy. The divine signature also manifests in spiritual transformation. Through the chaplet, your heart, mind, and soul are shaped to recognize mercy, respond with trust, and act in alignment with God's will. The subtle shifts, the growing faith, the inner clarity, and the compassion for others, all these are part of the signature that reveals itself as you reflect on the path you have traveled. What once felt like delays, hardships, or unanswered prayers becomes the story of mercy writing itself into your life with precision and purpose. In the end, the most profound answer God gives through the chaplet is the ability to recognize His work in retrospect. You begin to see that mercy was never absent, that every moment, encounter, and trial carried His divine purpose. The chaplet teaches trust in the process, patience in waiting, and discernment in observing the patterns of grace. This realization brings peace that surpasses understanding, gratitude that fills the heart, and awe at the intricate, loving design of God's mercy. It is the final, ultimate answer, proof that God's hand is always present, always guiding, and always writing a story of salvation that you may only fully understand with time. This is the divine signature, the hidden answer that turns every challenge, delay, and unanswered prayer into a testimony of mercy, shaping a life that reflects the presence, wisdom, and love of God. It is the final answer, the conclusion that draws together every prayer, every tear, and every act of faith into a tapestry of mercy that reveals itself in the fullness of time. The chaplet is not merely a prayer, it is a journey, a lens, and a revelation, showing that every petition, spoken with faith, leaves an eternal mark on the soul and the unfolding of God's plan. The story of the Divine Mercy Chaplet concludes not in the moment of prayer, but in the life transformed by it, in the mercy recognized long after the beads have been counted, in the faith awakened, the hearts touched, and the invisible battles fought and won. Time reveals that every prayer mattered, every tear was seen, and every act of faith was answered in the most profound, enduring way imaginable. This is the final, powerful truth. God's mercy is constant, His responses are perfect, and His signature is unmistakable for those who trust, persevere, and reflect.